Hello, my friends. So, I've been doing this rewatch of Babylon 5, and I think that I did a review of season 1 in season 2. So, I'm kind of gonna abandon that format a little bit and just kind of give you my impressions after season 4. Because I think that Babylon 5, it's a very odd show because it was planned for 5 seasons, and then the network that it was on, I think it was called Prime Entertainment, kind of went bankrupt at the end of the fourth season. So there was some doubt that the show would continue, and then it was picked up by a network called TNT. So So it feels like there's a big cut between season 4 and season 5. So far, the you can divide Babylon 5 into separate plots. The first is the Shadow War, and that kind of comes to an end somewhat abruptly at the end of season 2. And then in season, or maybe not the end of season 2, maybe it's the end of season 3, I don't remember. But then season 4 focuses on two civil wars, one on Minbar and one on Earth, but the one on Earth is given a lot of attention, and the one on Minbar is basically Delenn goes and makes a speech and everybody loves each other again, which is very typical for Delenn. So it's kind of about consequences, and I think that that's an interesting thing about the the writing of the show, because there's this one moment later when in season 5 when Londo has is having a near death experience. And when somebody says, so he's imagining Jakar. I don't think it's Jakar who says this, but he's imagining different characters. And I think Sheridan says to him, "You're not alive. You're a metaphor." Or Veer says you're a metaphor, or something. And the the characters have this sort of like awareness that they're characters, kind of, not really, but sort of. And I don't know. I think that the Shadow War is an interesting plot, but it kind of loses steam when both the Shadows and the Vorlons just decide to leave because a bunch of the first ones tell them to. So it doesn't make a lot of sense. I think that the plot of the civil war between like Earth Force and the forces of John Sheridan, who are trying to remove President Clark, it makes a lot more sense, and it's much more entertaining and emotionally heavy. Especially this line when they think that Sheridan is going to be killed, and there's this big battle between these ships that have Earth ships that have shadow technology and the White Star Fleet. And Avonova says something like, "I am the last living person you'll see." She gives this great speech, this powerful speech. And I had like tears because she's in my eyes when she was saying this, because basically she's like, "I'm here. I don't want to be here, but you need to be stopped." Because basically Sheridan and Ivonova, they started this rebellion because Earth Force was killing civilians and they needed to be stopped. So that was really, really quite sad. And then there's a moment where Ivonova says all love is unrequited. And like, so in the show, like she seems to make it, and this is also kind of weird. So this character named Marcus, he's kind of a ranger, and he falls in love with her, and it's unrequited love. And I think the writing of the show does something really great because they don't say that Susan ever loved her, right? That Susanna ever loved him. They say something like, "Why didn't I give him a chance?" Because there's a difference between being sad that somebody who loved you is dead, um, and loving them in that way. And I think the easy way would have been like, "Oh yeah, I finally know that I loved him," or whatever. No. And so that's a powerful moment, but like when we think that she's dying, like I also, it was really sad for me. And she also describes this. So basically, how she gets saved from death is that Marcus sacrifices his life energy through this sort of like alien technology that was referenced in earlier seasons. I think season one or season two, that they had on Babylon 5, but they didn't want to use because it's dangerous. So Marcus uses this machine. He gives his life energy to Susanna, and Susanna ends up dying anyway. That's not really clear. I think she may have wanted, she was going to come back for season 5, but then they weren't sure that there was going to be a season 5. And so, well, I'll talk a little bit about that more, but I want to talk about what Susanna says. She's like, yes, it was very peaceful. And I felt like, yeah, I'm dying, but it's my time. It's okay. And then I heard this voice saying, I love you. And it was like then I felt tired and I felt in pain and I was coming back. So basically, it's kind of like I don't like this for Buffy. I'm going to go talk about Buffy the Vampire Slayer now if you haven't seen that series. But I didn't like the fact that they brought Buffy back because Buffy dies in that series. But Buffy was in heaven, basically, and they brought her back. And she has a lot of resentment that they did that because they needed some slayer or something. And she was like tired of fighting and, you know, all of these evil spirits and stuff. And she kind of has a point. Like, if people can't accept your death, that's their problem. It's not your problem. You are dead. You're on like the next stage of your adventure or whatever. So yeah. So back to why Ivanova didn't come back in the fifth season. So the actress who played her, sorry, I don't remember her name. This is just me speaking off the cuff. But the actress who played her, she's since become this advocate for a specific kind of cure for alcoholism. So she says that she was an alcoholic at this time. So she says that she wanted to come back. And the creator of Babylon 5 says that she didn't want to come back. So I think it's maybe one of those situations where she wasn't really in control of what she was saying then. And maybe the plan was for her to come back, but then this cancellation gave this great opportunity to actually give a great ending for the character. Like, she dies. That's a great ending for a character. I mean, it kind of sounds weird, but like, you know, if you're an actor, that's a really powerful emotional moment. And she does a great job with Ivonova, like one of the best characters on the show, right? But then she comes back, and she does have the great line about all love being unrequited. But then what happens to her later? It's kind of heavily suggested that she died anyway. So Marcus died, and she died for nothing. Kind of weird. Kind of weird, but okay. So I'm in the. And then at the end of the fourth season, because they thought it was the last episode, they do this really kind of unique episode where they fast forward in time and they're talking about like how different historical periods would look back on this time. And that's really interesting too, because I think you could do the same thing, like with our own history and much more recent examples. Like, think about how people thought about George Bush and neoconservatism in 2001, 2002, and obviously he's still a controversial figure because of what happened in Iraq and Afghanistan. But he had one type of reality, and then Trump came along, and people kind of reevaluated at least his personality and said, like, yeah, he was dumb, but he never pretended not to be dumb. You know, the worst thing is when you have a dumb person who pretends to be smart. Although I think Trump is smarter than George W. Bush in a lot of in certain ways, but in the ways that count, I think that he is far less intelligent, or at least equally as unintelligent as George W. Bush. And then, so we have like reevaluations of different historical periods. So that's interesting. That episode is quite interesting. And so then we have like the fifth season, which is kind of like, I think they had maybe a different idea for the fifth season, but it got canceled and then they got a chance to do it again. So yeah, it'll be interesting. I'm not sure how I'm going to actually put all this together because doing the rewatch actually took me like a couple of weeks. Um, so I don't know. I don't know. But yeah, I will put it together somehow. I think maybe I want to do a character analysis of each of these characters because especially like the important ones I think that the emotional heart of the series is Ivonova and Jakar and Londo and Garibaldi. Oh, Garibaldi also has like an interesting kind of turn in the fourth season because at the end of the third season, so the Shadow War ends and he gets trapped by the shadows, and the shadows are working with the authoritarian Earth government, and they hate telepaths because telepaths are the only ones who can disrupt the way their ships work. And shadow technology is really crazy because they have these kind of organic ships which are run by organic computers. So basically like people or whatever, and they're the ones who are piloting the ships. So every time you see like a battle with these big kind of ominous shadow vessels, they're not full of shadows. The shadows aren't there, which is interesting of itself. But anyway, he gets captured, and then so they send him back to Earth. They send him to this telepathic facility, and there's this guy Bester, who I haven't talked about yet, but he's played by Walter Koenig, I think. No, Walter Koenig? I think, well, I don't know. He's played by one of the original actors from Star Trek, the original series, and the guy who played Chekhov. And he does a great job as Bester. So Bester is basically the Psi cop, which is basically a cop with telepathic abilities who can be used to do investigations, and he has his own kind of motivations. And so he kidnaps Garibaldi, and he makes Garibaldi into sort of like a sleeper agent. And Garibaldi comes back, and he really, really dislikes Sheridan. And I thought that was interesting, but a little bit like, I don't think that they handled it well. I think that it would have been better if he had legitimate beef with Sheridan, because his beef is like very, very exaggerated. He thinks that Sheridan is becoming this messianic figure, and he doesn't like that, and he thinks that Sheridan is building this cult around himself. So kind of we know that Garibaldi is being too extreme, but and so we're like, oh yeah, Garibaldi. Oh, what are you doing? What are you doing? That's of course Sheridan would never be like that. But the story is so well written. Like, why not make Sheridan like that? why not give your heroes kind of feats of brass, I guess is the expression? And maybe not all the time, but if people start kind of worshiping you, it's hard to be consistent, right? Like maybe at least show him being tempted by that. And I think if Garibaldi had come from like that he wasn't brainwashed, because he was skeptical of Sheridan in the beginning because the reason he's on Babylon 5 is because of Sinclair, the first captain of Babylon 5. So I'm not I don't really buy the fact I didn't really like that. And then he gets a job with one of the richest people on Mars, and that guy, the richest person on Mars, is trying to um, create a drug that will make the telepaths dependent on it. And if they don't get the antidote, like he's going to release a virus that basically will give him this disease that will kill telepaths unless they get the antidote, which they would control. Because he feels like the government has been taken over by telepaths. And then they capture Sheridan, and I don't know, like I don't really know what. So that guy's name was Edgar's, the character, and I'm not sure what his real end game was because basically he thought that if they gave Sheridan to Clark, then Clark would let his guard down, and then he could get rid of the telepaths, and then they could like restore the control of the corporations or whatever. And it's also weird because Garibaldi, who's like a working class guy, grunt, so Edgar's tells him this that basically they are trying to have this coup for like corporate interests. And he asks, "Are you okay with that, Mr. Garibaldi?" And Mr. Garibaldi's like, "Yeah, yeah, fine." That would be the first sign that the guy's been brainwashed or something. So he has been brainwashed, and then but he has given Sheridan over to Earth Force, and it would be good if he had like maybe I know that he will have a reaction to this in season 5, but it would be good to see that people don't trust him anymore. Like they don't trust him for like maybe one episode, but then two the telepath scans his brain and like shows that he has been used, and so everybody believes him now. But it would be good if Sheridan kind of distrusted him more. Yeah, but really great writing, really great acting. And I think that the actor who plays Garibaldi in season 4, like I might personally dislike this idea of him being kind of a sleeper agent, but I think that he really goes through a lot emotionally, especially after he discovers he's been used. Like this moment where he's just sitting there and he realizes what he's done. You know, he wasn't in control of it, but he realizes this. So kind of very strange. All right. So I will check in with you after the last season of Babylon 5 that I'll finish soon, hopefully. All right, bye.